From the Middle is proud to be a founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 119 of From the Middle. It's just Kory and Kendall tonight. Dillon is no longer with us. He didn't die. He's just having an anniversary celebration. In this week's episode, wow, that was bad.
I like it, dude.
Okay, we'll keep it going. In this week's episode, we talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and I would tell you about it, but I forgot where I wrote it down. We talk about cheap beer. I'm hanging out in New York City this week, which related to the VMAs, and we're feeling really old while watching those. We tell a few fishing stories. Kendall quizzes me on some internet shorthand to see how well versed I am in that. I give an update on our puppy, and then we do a couple deep dives into media and entertainment. Enjoy.
Oh, for the love. Sorry, just clearing my Mountain Dew hole.
I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it? You're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved.
How are you, man? It's good to see you.
I'm good. I really am. How are you? I suppose we should point out Dillon's not here. Happy anniversary to Dillon and Bree. On the night that we are recording this is the night that they are doing something more fun, and at least I hope so.
Yeah, our first episode, Sans Dillon, and because he made the wiser choice and is hanging out with his wife instead of us. And so happy anniversary, Dillon and Bree. You guys are an awesome couple, and we celebrate you on this day.
We sure do. I'm drinking cheap beer today.
Wow. The old Busch Light. Nice.
The old Busch Light. You know, I told Amy that, like, I want a beer. I almost never have beer in the house. And back in my bachelor days, it was like Busch Light was popular.
Yeah.
With me, just because, like, of the cheap beers, it was my favorite one. And I drank other stuff too, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know what it is. I was pulled to like drinking cheap beer sometimes.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a little bit more rootsy of me to to do that. And so every year, a Busch Light around this time of year, sometime in the fall, they come out with their camo cans to sell to all the hunters. And so, like, I would make that a little fall tradition of myself to buy a box of camo Busch Light cans. So last time Amy went to the grocery store, and I put Busch Light on the list. So that's that. How are you doing, Kory?
I'm doing well. Well, first I'm thinking of a bunch of drunk hunters in the woods, and that's really scary. But at least
as long as the beer doesn't scare off the.
Yeah, at least their cans are camouflaged. I'm doing well, man. As you can tell by the background, for those watching on YouTube, I'm in a different location. I'm in Midtown Manhattan for a work trip. So I'm in my hotel on this lovely evening from New York. Pretty crazy. I quite literally have the Empire State Building just outside my hotel room. You can see the Empire State Building lit up at night.
Yeah.
So there's
the picture, and it was like, holy cow, man.
Yeah.
It is deep pockets over there.
Yeah. You know, I ain't paying for it. But it was funny. So my window only cracks open like 3 inches because apparently they don't want us jumping. So I crack open the window to get a good shot of the Empire State Building without having to go through the glass reflections and all that. Yeah, right when I got here. And I turn on the TV in my hotel room and I catch the VMAs, the MTV Video Music Awards.
Oh, wow.
And just a few moments after I turn it on, Alicia Keys is singing New York, her song New York, from the Barclays Center, which is in just down in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So I had this moment where I'm like,
she's singing to me.
Yeah, I'm looking out the window and Alicia Keys is singing New York to me. And she's just like on the other side of town. And it was this surreal experience where she was outside for her song on an outside stage. The rest of the show was filmed inside. And you could see the Empire State Building and the same. It was just the same. It was just kind of cool.
So you guys were looking at the same Empire State Building. No matter where you are, Rihanna.
Alicia, we're looking at the same. But dude, I ended up I didn't even care what was on because I was just unpacking, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up watching a little bit more of the VMAs. And I know you'll appreciate this because you're a music guy, but I was like, two things happened. I felt really old because I was like, what is happening with music? Like Alicia Keys is one thing. I think she's a phenomenal musician. She's got a great voice. But for the rest of the show, like it just felt like it was all about, and this is kind of a hacky thing to say about music today, but it feels like music today is so much about everything except for the music. Like apparently Conor McGregor and Machine Gun Kelly got in a fight on the red carpet, and Doja Cat had a chair on her head and she wore shoes at the end of the night that were like chicken feet. And it was just like a lot of trashy, like, I don't know, man. I just felt really old watching it. I'm like, I don't get so much of what's happening here. I don't get the music. I don't get the fashion. And it feels like it's just about shock value. And I don't know, man. I just felt really old.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, speaking from a place that tries to understand the art behind what they're doing, and I get the idea of music videos as being a reflection into the music itself, if that makes sense. So the idea that there's emotions and stories and things inside of music, even without words, that an artist has in their mind that they're trying to get through using this medium. And a music video gives you a visual that kind of helps portray some of that. And I'm good with that. But then you have these award shows, and it's not even about that. Now it's not about, like you said, it's not about the music. Now it's about Machine Gun Kelly, not about what Machine Gun Kelly has done and recorded and put out there, but it's now about him, which is
and what he wore that night. And he's dating Megan Fox. And by the way, side note, Megan Fox in like, I think one of the main first films she was in was like Transformers, when she was this attractive, like relatively normal looking young lady. And now she just looks like she's had a bunch of work done, and she's dating Machine Gun Kelly. I feel like he's trashing her. He's making her trashier. She just looked really. And then when he won whatever award he won last night, they just touched tongues. They didn't kiss and French kiss. They just stuck out their tongues touched tongues. And I was like, what am I watching?
See,
but this is exactly why. Because we're talking about it the next day. It's not like you said, it's not even about the videos anymore. It's about what they wore, who got in a fight, who said what was the live performance like. and they're just trying to, I don't know, man. I just
Yeah.
felt really old, and I felt really out of touch, and like, I don't know. The Foo Fighters had a cool performance, so that was dope, but the
Yeah.
rest was,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like antics are fine to me, like in context of music. Even if I don't necessarily agree or feel heart to heart with the thing that they're putting out there, I still can often appreciate it, or at the very least, look past the one thing because I like the other thing.
yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, when it I don't know. I feel like there's a few things going on there. There's certainly some narcissism going on there with these people kind of puffing themselves up,
Yeah.
and they can make some really good music, and they can evoke some good thought and emotion through the things that they're doing. Um, but then they get puffed up to a point where like they want more attention for themselves and
Yeah.
they want fame and fortune for themselves, and that becomes a thing that is so incredibly important. And you mix that with like expectations that get put on them by fandom, and now there's this like paparazzi thing that goes on too. So not only do you have artists that are going astray, diverting people away from the art, um, but you also have, unfortunately, a lot of fans who don't care about the art. What they want is the um, is the paparazzi stuff.
And I get that, like, every generation had its music artist pushing the envelope. Like, I absolutely get that. Like, Madonna, 80s. I mean, you had like Kid Rock and Marilyn Manson in the 90s. Like, you go back even further, like every generation had its art. Like Elvis.
Elvis, you name it,
Elvis
you
was
name it.
like shock content, with gyrating his hips in such a fashion.
But what was shocking was his performances and the music. Like that's the difference. That's the difference.
Who were the people for you? I mean, we grew up pretty,
Punk was
conservative.
huge.
Who were the people that you felt like I have to hide from my parents, that I want to try to listen to some of their music or look at their album art?
Yeah. I will say that my parents didn't really care too much about what I was listening to.
Yeah.
As long as I didn't hear too much swearing, they didn't really care too much.
Sure.
But I would say, like, so Aerosmith was big when I was young. That I was listening to Green Day and Offspring.
Yeah.
Those two in particular, I know that I was into both of those bands. I was into the whole early punk scene, with Green Day and Blink-182. For my generation, that was the early punk scene. I realized anyway. But for those, like, there were some songs that I would just conveniently not play in my room when I knew my parents were in the area. But yeah, there were those bands. So the whole punk, like, I'm not good, like the anarchy idea, which is kind of the antithesis of what we have going on now in the culture of music. There aren't a lot of anarchists out there anymore. In the pop world making music, but the idea of be yourself and don't allow governments to tell you what to do, kind of thing, was helped shape and mold me a little bit. Not that I'm an anarchist, I'm not.
Right.
Which, by the way,
loyal listeners will know by now, Kendall the anarchist.
Which, by the way, I might add too, that even that stuff, for the most part, from those bands, it was a lot of it is an act, right?
100%. Yeah.
So they know what they're doing, but it's art nonetheless. What about you? So I was in the end of the punk world and the soft metal glam.
Yeah, mine were like comedy music albums, like Adam Sandler and stuff like that, where the language was just a lot of language, but I loved the comedy side of it, like Tenacious D, I loved Tenacious D, man. My friend Tammy and I would had that breakout album memorized.
Yeah.
Um, that type stuff. I never really got into hip hop much, which, the language there is a bit crass. Um, my buddy was a big Kiss fan, and I
Okay.
wanted to like explore their albums, but my mom was like, "That's Knights in Satan's Service." Um,
Oh yeah. Well,
and so she's like, "You can't listen to that." But yeah, pretty much just like the comedy album stuff. That's funny. Speaking of Blink 182, I shared with you and Dillon in the text thread the other day that you guys know I've been listening to a lot of comedian Bobby Lee. His younger brother Steve Lee, Stevie Weeby, has the Stevie Weeby Show podcast, as well as Scissor Bros with his comic friend Jeremiah Watkins. Anyway, Bobby and Steve went to Poway High School with Tom DeLonge,
nice.
and they've each for years been begging him to come on to one of their shows.
Yeah.
And because Steve's show is the Scissor Bros, they've had multiple calls to actions to their fans, like just put a ton of scissor emojis on Tom DeLonge's social media to try to get him to come onto our podcast. And he's totally ghosting both of them. But I think it's hilarious that there's this campaign to get Tom DeLonge to respond to them. I know we've talked about him on the show before, and like some of the stuff he's doing with like UFO and alien research, but I just thought that was a really funny story about that they went to high school together and he won't respond to any of their messages.
Yeah, that makes me feel good for not getting Tom DeLonge on our podcast.
Because boy, have we been trying. What else is going on, man? How you been? What's going on in your life?
Oh boy.
What's new? Have you had more fishing exploits?
There's always new fishing exploits. So I took my daughter is starting to get into it now.
Yeah?
I think like I'm pretty sure that like something went off in her brain and she just wants to go fishing now. And so like, all right. So I took her, just her. I'm taking the kids one at a time now for a while. And so I took her on Friday night and we fished till dark. It was getting kind of chilly out there and like we couldn't see anymore. And she was complaining about being, not really complaining, but saying how cold she was. And I was like, all right, you want to go? No, not yet. Like she kept throwing line in the water. It was such a good experience. She didn't catch anything. She hasn't caught anything yet, but she's casting very well. And she's doing some things a little quicker than the boys did. So like cleaning, weeds and stuff off of your lure, all wet and soggy, muddy junk off of your line and whatnot. Like the boys do it now, but it took them a minute to like be okay with touching the icky things,
Yeah.
Man, Lydia just like nothing. Like I'll be 30 yards away from her and she's over there like cleaning off her lure. Like I didn't even know that there was a problem and she's over there fixing it. And then next thing I know, like she's throwing her spinning reel out. Like I don't know, she's casting a good maybe 50 feet or so, which is pretty good for her age. We're fishing off of the bank, and the fish that we're getting are for the most part relatively near the bank right now this time of year, and so that's plenty far enough for her to get out and then reel it into where the fish are. Surprised she didn't get anything. I did, and here's another thing. So like me and her were talking one day about fishing after we had already decided that she was going to be the next one to go with me. And she's like, she knew that her brothers wouldn't hold the fish that they have caught so far. I'm going to bribe them into that. Like they'll get their own little tackle boxes when they start holding their own fish and unhooking their own fish.
Yeah. Good incentive.
Yeah. And so she was aware of that, and she asked me, she's like have either of the boys touched a fish yet? I was like, no, they haven't. And I had asked each of them, like I'm sitting there holding a fish, right? A fish that they caught. Both of them, it was the same thing. I asked them if they want to hold it. They won't get within 3 feet of it. And then I'm like, do you want to at least touch it? Like, and I'm assuring them that, like, look, I know what I'm doing. This is going to be safe. Neither one of them wanted to even touch the thing. So, which is why, like, the pictures that I've shared with you are like,
you're holding the bass. Yeah.
I'm holding the bass. They're standing behind me over my shoulder looking at the camera. So she's like, have they touched you yet? I'm like, no, baby girl, they haven't. And Lydia's like, I'm going to touch one. So she's got this competition thing going on in her head with her brothers, which I think is great. And sure enough, like I caught a fish, and she came running over. I unhook it and I'm holding it, showing it to her, and she just swipes at it with her finger, and she's like, I touched a fish. We on the way home we call her mom, and that was the first thing out of her mouth. Was I touched a fish. Mama, get the boys. I touched a fish.
That's funny. The boys want nothing to do with the icky stuff, and she's all about it.
Yeah. So now we've got this little sibling rivalry thing going on. I'm sure that the boys will be touching the next fish that come out of water when it's their turn up. But they're propelling each other forward. It's a good thing.
This is such a fun season, man. I'm glad that we do this podcast partly so that you can just crystallize these little small moments with your kiddos and experiencing something new. That's pretty special.
Yeah, I love it. I could talk fishing forever.
Well, Dillon says we need to do our own spin-off fishing show. So I've got some fishing stories.
I need to find a guy with a boat. Share me a fishing story. I want to hear one of yours.
So I had a colleague, man, this is early in my like big boy job career. And she had a property out in the country with a pond that she said hadn't been fished in years. And she knew she had large fish in it, but she hadn't kept up with it. Single lady. And so she wasn't mowing the grass around it. She wasn't doing anything. It's just a big farm pond with big fish in it. And I was like, I'm all about that.
Yeah.
So she said, come out anytime you want. So I went out one day and was really excited to see what exactly she had in this pond. So I get my tackle box out and I'm setting up a few different types of lines to try different things, right? Some I went out at like dusk. So I'm trying some like jitterbugs that float on top, and I'm trying some like different jelly type, lures, and I'm trying some I'm just trying a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah.
When she comes out of her house to say hi, because she hadn't greeted me yet since I had been there. And she's got this big German Shepherd. And the German Shepherd starts like sniffing around my tackle box with all my lures and stuff out. So I'm getting nervous because I don't want this dog to get hooked.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the dog steps on one of my lures that had 2 sets of 3 hooks.
Right.
And so I'm like, Carol, your dog. And she's like, oh, he's fine. And I'm like, no, your dog is stepping on hooks and stuff. And so she's like, oh. So it had it in its paw, not in the meat part of its paw. It was just loosely tangled in some fur. Good. So now I've got to get a dog that doesn't know me. And I've got to try to get this
dog,
a very large dog. So I go to start pulling the lure out of its paw, and it jerks the lure underneath my thumbnail, and it jerked it down toward my hand. And I'm like, and if you know anything about getting a hook in you, you've really only got, well, I guess you do have 2 options, but one is a lot better than the other. If it's in a place that's, sorry if this grosses you folks out, or for those that get woozy about, you got to run the hook all the way through, cut the barb, and then back it out.
Yeah.
Because to try to just jerk it out, it's got a barb on that hook and it's not going to want to come out.
Right.
And there was no way it was coming out with me fainting. And so I'm like, just take me to an urgent care. So
Jeez.
that's my fishing at my colleague's pond for the first time. But the part that was frustrating was like when it was sniffing through all the stuff and she wasn't like calling the dog off or saying, "Come on, step back, step back, step back," or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh,
I worry about that too. Like not I've never been hooked in that fashion before. Um, but yeah, like fishing in a park now with my kids, which is not something that I've typically done, like fishing in a public park with like playgrounds and stuff, right?
yeah,
And people walking dogs off of a leash, and like I'm there with like 50 yards away from my tackle box that's open,
mm-hmm.
right? And I worry about the exact same thing. Like, what if that dog gets curious?
Yep,
And is it going to be my fault if that dog gets into trouble?
yep.
Um, so I mean, thankfully, like in the morning, that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's always with like the bolder people, because then it's just like it's just me, my kid, and this one dog walker who's awake at 6:30 in the morning,
Right.
and because there's no one else in the park, like their dog's off of a leash. If it wasn't for me, they'd be the only one in the park.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably what they're used to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had those thoughts.
Well, speaking of pups, I just have a quick dog
Yeah.
update. Um, it's kind of a multi-layered story. So you said something. So Dillon shared last week about Finley, his daughter, my niece, going to preschool for the first time.
Right.
And he had this recognition that it was the beginning of a new era, the school era, that she will be in school for the next 12, 13 years, right? Just, and, could be longer if she goes to college, right? And you had said you had just reached the beginning of a new era where all your kids are in school during the day now, and you can have lunch by yourself, which is like bittersweet because you've
Yeah.
before this had lunch with your kids, and now they're gone, and you've like got this little bit of quiet time during the day. So for the first time in Sherry and I's married life, this is going to be 17 years on Thursday. We have all three kids in all day school.
Yeah.
So we also just got a puppy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Sherry was like, for the first time in 14 years since we've had children, I'm finally going to have 6 hours a day now because all three kids are in all day school and we get a puppy. And I felt a little guilty that I hadn't really considered it to that level, that for the first time in 14 years, she has this massive chunk of her days again. And she just got a big promotion at her job and is excited about like some goals that she has with this new role. And so, I was kind of on the leading edge, I guess, of the decision to get this puppy, which she now has to manage for part of that 6 hours.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, she could have thought of that too, right? And
Right.
presumably didn't.
Well, she did. And she requested that we at least wait till spring just to give her some time to enjoy this newfound season of life.
Okay.
But then that's when the breeder called and said somebody else is interested in the pup. You have an hour to let us know. And then I said I will
Yeah.
take Lily.
Okay.
But here's the good part of this whole story, and it does come
Right.
back to puppies. This dog, dude, the first day, I mean, we would take her outside, but she was using the bathroom outside. And like within a day or two, she was sleeping in a crate through the night.
Wow.
I have still not heard this dog bark. I don't know what the dog's bark sounds like.
Wow.
I know what its whimper sounds like. It whimpered for a little bit, like on the first night when we put her in the crate. But dude, Lily couldn't have picked a better temperamented, I don't know if that's a word, puppy. Like, so that makes me feel a little bit better about ruining Sherry's 6 hours, because this puppy is so chill and like
Yeah.
she's almost housebroken, and she'll be crate trained in not too long.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So that's my dog update or pup update or pup date.
Yeah.
And if you've listened to the show for a while, you know how much I hate cutesy animal terms, especially the term fur baby. And I have to send a special shout out. We'll share a picture later on our socials. One of our loyal listeners sent me a hat that says with a little paw icon symbol, Padre, Pawdre. Now, my kids call me Padre, the Spanish word for father. And so this hat says Padre, and I hate it. And I also love that this listener sent it to me. So
yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. So thank you, Kennedy, for that. That was quite hilarious. But yeah, more fun stories with Kendall and I after a quick word from one of our friends in the Odd Pods Media Network.
Hi, I'm Tina Jaramillo.
And I'm Hillary Doherty.
And we host the Muck Podcast, where we discuss the dark and sometimes weird true stories in American politics.
Hey, Tina, did you know that Elvis crashed the Nixon White House for the sole purpose of getting a DEA badge, and it worked?
What? Or how a gun control advocate senator out of California engaged in gun trafficking with notorious gang leader Shrimp Boy?
Shrimp Boy, I remember him. Okay, so, we cover all of that and more for maladies, madness, mischief, and murder in U.S. politics.
And we also host a bi-weekly interview segment called Lil Muck.
We interview politicians, journalists, activists, and others who share their experiences in politics.
Find the Muck Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and check us out on social media at the Muck Podcast.
Hey, before we continue with the second half of this episode, I just want to give a sincere thank you to two companies that we do work with and that sponsor this podcast. The first is Artiusman, ARTIUSMAN.com. It's phenomenal men's grooming products using natural products. I'm wearing the Lager beard oil right now. They have wooden combs and hats and shampoo and soaps and just a ton of really good quality men's grooming products. And we love working with them. I highly recommend their stuff. And if you go to their website and fill your cart using promo code The Middle at checkout, you'll get 25% off your order. That's artiusman.com, ARTIUSMAN.com. The second company we just started working with a handful of weeks ago, Stello Mints. They make really, really good CBD mints that I have with me on this work trip. They sort of curb that travel anxiety. For those that don't like traveling or find yourself in stressful meetings or tense situations from time to time, they're just enough to kind of take the edge off. And 3 awesome flavors: mint, matcha tea, and lemon. And the tin is really classy and cool, and it's got great packaging, and it's something that you would feel comfortable taking anywhere. That's stellomints.com, STELLOMINTS.com. Use promo code The Middle at checkout to get 10% off all orders. Thank you, Artius Man. Thank you, Stello Mints. We really appreciate doing business with you. And we don't do reads for products that we don't genuinely have interest in and haven't had good success stories with and testimonials. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Moving on.
All right. So I thought it'd be fun. I came across an article that didn't really blow me away. It just highlighted an area of my life where I am deficient. And that is internet shorthand and abbreviations. We were talking earlier about the VMAs, watching the VMAs and being in our mid 30s. Is very much a situation where you are taught once again how you're aging, and that there are people much younger than you who are doing things that you just don't get or understand. They also have their own way of talking on the interwebs and the text messages and the things of that nature. Much of which I knew. I thought I was better at it than I am, because I read this article and it showed me hundreds of things, most of which I had never seen before. So I thought it'd be fun to go through these and kind of pick some out
What a fun idea. It reminds me of the year in review we did where we tried to see if we knew what the slang terms from that year meant.
It's the same thing. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, Kory, if you know what these things mean.
All right. And we encourage you to play along at home.
So there's a category for this one, which will help you.
Okay.
So these are ones that basically teenagers use to try to hide chats from their parents' eyes, right?
We should know about this.
So that this kind of category. So the first one, I think you'll get some of these. PAW, paw.
Parents at work?
Parents are watching.
Parents are watching. Okay.
Yeah.
Oy.
So you see if you see your kid type in PAW, that means that they're telling the person they're talking to not to say whatever it is that they were about to say because you're in the room. Parents are watching. PITR.
Parents in the room.
There you go. POMS. POMS.
Parents
over my shoulder.
These are all a version of the same one.
They're all like here's one. KPC.
No idea.
Keeping parents clueless.
Oh, I don't like this. As the father of a 14-year-old, I don't like this, but I know I should know these things. I've just allowed her to text with a select group of boys. And so it's probably good that I know some of these things. All right.
Sure. Okay. We're moving on from that category.
All right. Yeah.
There were more.
Yeah, this is uncomfortable.
So these ones are a little bit more emotional ones. TFW.
No.
That feeling win.
Okay. Yeah.
So we've all seen that one before.
Yeah. Memes.
I think, yep. All right. LOL. We all know that one.
Yeah. Lots of love. Got it.
Lots of TNTL. See, this is what I'm talking about. Most of these we don't know. Trying not to laugh. The IDC.
I don't care.
There you go. All right. See, I like to throw some confidence ones in there for you.
Just to get my hopes up, just to bring them on back down.
Oh, here's one that I didn't quite know. So we've all heard the term BAE, right? Me and my BAE are going to the movies. What does BAE stand for? It's an abbreviation.
I didn't know it was
It is a thing. It means before anyone else. So not like chronologically, but in like attention or love or time spent. This is my before. So Sherry is your before anyone else. There's Sherry.
I appreciate that term more now because
there you go.
I like it a little better now because I thought Bae was just baby.
That's exactly what I thought too. I was thinking
that's actually kind of cute. That's a cute definition.
She's my before anyone else.
I like it.
Yeah. So I like that one. And then there's time, TIME.
Nope.
Tears in my eyes.
Okay.
This LMAO, we all know that one.
Yep.
BFF.
Yep.
Let's see here. TBH.
To be honest.
Yep. FTW.
For the win.
Yep. OMDB.
Oh.
Over my dead body.
Okay.
I wish there were some really funny ones in here. They just aren't. But I thought it would be an eye opener to like, there's a whole world out there.
Have you used any of these so far, other than like LOL?
I don't even use LOL. Like for some reason, I loathe internet shorthand, and I would just type out the words.
I think I've said this on the cast before, but like, I think I was at a Claire's, which it's the perfect setting for this. I was with Lily. She was shopping for some accessories, and some teenage girls in the store were talking in internet shorthand. They were saying
That's just
BRB.
lazy.
Yeah, it's almost more effort to slow down long enough to tell your brain to whatever.
Yeah.
It was really annoying.
I don't know what I would do. Like, I would really want to say something to them in that situation.
Other than, seriously?
I don't know. And then, like, again, but that's like the old man in me. That would
I know,
wanna,
between
like,
that and the VMAs,
I need
I'm
you
just-
to know how much you annoy me. So
you kids and your newfangled website words. Was that all of them?
Yeah, that's all the ones I care
Those
to
are-
bring
those
up.
are the good ones.
I mean, there's literally like hundreds in this list. It'd be fun to like get like Lily or somebody on here and run through those and see how many she actually knows. How many of those can one person actually know? Do kids practice these things? Do they like go on and research and be like, I want to be cool, so I want to know the most abbreviations? I bet you they do. I bet you they go on and try
That, or
to
they have a
memorize some of this
trusted
stuff.
friend that they could ask and be like, what does that one even mean? Oh, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I was talking to a guy about like, you know, Marvel movies and Star Wars and stuff. How like I feel like there's a lot of people that they go into the blogs for these universes and just to get all kinds of information. I feel like so that they can, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but so that they can talk to somebody about it. Like that's I feel like that's true. It could just be because like people just
to
have
like
much
to like
better-
fill up on subject matter and content.
Yes,
so you
yeah,
can carry
because
on a conversation. It's like what I do when Sherry talks about sports. I listen to all her distillation of Sports Center, and then when my buddies are talking sports, I go, "Yeah, did you guys hear?" And I just tell them everything Sherry told me.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always kind of had that little thought. Like, look at the Avengers movies, and the fact that like this year I watched all of them. Like they're all fresh in my mind. I can't hang with you and Dillon talking about them. And you guys saw some of these movies years ago. The last time you saw some of these movies was years ago. I watched them all this year. The storyline is fresh in my head. Like, how is it? Like, I can't have these conversations with you guys. And in my head, it's because you guys like are reading blogs and things and so that you can have conversations, so that you can like, I don't know, do you like, which is not something that I do. So do you like lay awake at night and have like questions pop into your head and then you're like, oh, I need to find an answer, or at least find out what people are saying about this? Like, or do you just like retain information from movies much better than I do?
So Dillon's much better at the retaining. He also will read a lot more articles and stuff that I do to draw the connective tissue throughout these films, like little Easter eggs and stuff. And because of like YouTube, there's all these geek culture channels that like 37 things you missed in this week's episode of Loki. And it's like a sticker on a thing in the background of a thing that was a callback to a. So it just depends on how much of that stuff you consume. If I'm looking something up, it's usually because I missed a connection. And I feel like the music at that part made me feel like I'm supposed to have remembered something. So mine is like much more centrist on that stuff. I'm not as deep as Dillon is in the Marvel stuff. But the rest, I think, like Star Wars maybe, or I guess it's anything like Harley, or if you're into carpentry or whatever, like if you're on forums and blogs where you're, you know, asking these questions, it's the echo chamber thing, right? You're just going to know more because you're surrounding yourself with it. So now Facebook and Instagram now know the algorithm to send me, you know, advertisements for Star Wars Sasquatch soaps because they know I'm probably going to buy the box set.
Right. and they got you.
And they got me.
I suppose that makes, of course, that's it. Like, that makes sense. I mean, when I'm watching football, like I'll I'll have my phone out because now I'm curious. Like Michigan's playing Washington,
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh, how impressive of a win is this going to be potentially?
Mhm.
And so like I'll get my phone out and I'll look at Washington's schedule and I'll look at like their last 5 games. I'll
Yep.
start looking at their depth charts and
Yep.
things of that nature, just because I have these questions that I feel like I want answers to right
Yep.
now.
When we were watching Black Widow, I got out my Marvel encyclopedia for a few things. I have this really nice hardback Marvel encyclopedia that's not about the MCU, it's about the comics and that character's origin story, what popular book series they appeared in, a little bit about their backstory, any teams that they were a part of. So he was part of the Fantastic Four for a while, and then he was a part of the X-Men or whatever. So that stuff is always interesting when my kids have questions that I don't know the answers to, like deep dive geek culture comic book podcasts like that know a lot more about that stuff than I do. But I appreciate that there are connections. I don't have that stuff in a database in my brain.
Yeah.
Of like, he was in episode number 312 of the second Civil War series where he was in an original team with the, and I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. That's
I
really
guess,
cool.
I guess probably the more you know, like the more you know you don't know, right? That old thing that people say, which is true, especially with very complicated things. So there's probably a lot of stuff in all of the Marvel movies that I've seen that like I wouldn't even know to look for a connection somewhere.
Yeah.
Because it was that subtle.
Yeah. And some of those are for that. They are
Yeah.
for the deep dive fans who
Yeah.
are looking for those things. But they don't want it to be so chock full of that stuff that as a casual viewer, you can't appreciate the basics of the storyline.
Right.
And I think they do a good job like pleasing both audiences in that way.
Yeah. It's like the big things can like they get me. It's like WandaVision was where I started.
Mm-hmm.
And WandaVision was one where it's like, okay, there's parts of the story here that would help me.
Yeah.
And so like that was my decision. Like I watched WandaVision and loved it and decided I wanted to understand WandaVision better. And so I just went way back and just started at movie 1.
It reminds me a little bit too of like if you're following an artist that you enjoy, or for me, like a stand-up comic, every time you learn more about that artist, whatever performing art or visual art they do, you learn who their influences were. Same is true for music, where they're like, oh, that's because he was influenced a ton by fill in the blank. And then you look up that person's stuff and you're like, he was influenced a ton by. And so there's always like this trail of what it is about that work that you enjoy. And so that's kind of fun because it's like this enjoyable rabbit trail. Yeah.
So Amy, my wife, she just watched the Avengers movies, not like all 14, whatever, some odd, like just like the Avengers.
The event, yeah.
And
I watched the titular films.
The titular films. And I watched probably a good bulk of them along with her. And in watching those, especially after watching Endgame again, I had the thought of, I don't know enough about Captain Marvel. I've seen the movie once, but I decided that like in the near future, I'm going to go back and rewatch Captain Marvel to learn more about her. And I told that to my wife and she felt the same way. That like, man, the Avengers movies didn't do a good enough job talking about who this like momentous character in Endgame is. And so she watched Captain Marvel without me. I'm so proud of her.
See, that's a perfect example.
And that's an example. I'm going to go back and watch Captain Marvel, but that's just like step 2 for me, right?
Yeah.
I'd imagine I could, if I let myself do it, I could get this to keep going to the point. I need to watch that again. Now I need to watch that again. Now I need to see, is there something else out here that's not in these films? Like I'm sure there is. I need to find that thing. I can see how somebody could follow rabbit
Yeah.
trails, and then eventually you become like super Dillon.
Yeah, Captain Marvel's a great example where I'm like, I don't know much about this character. And then you learn like there was like 3 or 4 versions of Captain Marvel. There was a guy version and a chick version. And yeah, what was the one that I did the other day? It wasn't a comic book thing. Oh, you know that I've been watching a lot of Steve Wallis on
Yeah.
YouTube. He's a stealth camper, a Canadian stealth camper, just a really sweet, kind guy. And I watched. He has a documentary from his days of boondocking, which is I don't know how widespread that term is. It's basically like camping in areas where you're not allowed to camp, basically.
Yeah.
In either an RV or something. So you're parking in illegal spots for camping. So just on someone's property or like on a logging trail or something. And in the comments, somebody said something like, "Love your videos, Steve. Were you inspired by Stoby the Hobo on YouTube?" And I'm like, who's Stoby the Hobo? So there's this kind of tragic story of this young guy that would ride the rails, like old fashioned, like rail riding, and just travel the country, drinking beer and hanging out on these rail cars. And he actually died. He was killed by he was dragged under a train. But anyway, like same thing. Like there's a story behind like all this stuff and who influences people, and you just start following this. It's one of those 2 a.m. things, and you're watching Stoby the Hobo videos, and you're like, how did I get here?
He's a good guy. I've been trying to get him on the podcast, by the way.
He's popular, man.
But
dude, you should go back and watch that boondocking documentary if you haven't seen it. It's a young version of Steve, and he was a little more foul in those days. And
yeah,
you can tell like there's a definite difference in Steve Wallis now that he's happily married and healthy. Like back in this boondocking video, like he physically looks just sad and kind of beat down and alone. And it's really interesting to see him now versus sort of where he came from.
Yeah.
And he filmed it all himself. It was really interesting. Anyway, that's random. That's why we do this little podcast. It gives us a little space and platform to just share what's going on in each other's lives and the things that we come across that we find interesting. I love it.
Yeah. So have you tried pizza yet in New York?
I haven't, but I have to say, for a long time, I've wanted to try Tavern on the Green. It's a very well-known restaurant in Central Park that it used to house sheep. There were sheep that would graze in Central Park like a long time ago. So this was like the barn for the sheep, I guess. And now it's this really cool rustic tavern. And it was amazing. I had a great, just a quality conversation with my work colleagues. And one of my colleagues, her daughter lives here in New York with her friend. And so we got to visit with them and just have a really nice meal. But no, I haven't done the iconic New York slice yet. I hope to make that happen, but I was really excited to try Tavern on the Green tonight.
Yeah. I feel like for pizza, I just love pizza, and so I would do it. But I've heard from some like what I would consider to be honest sources that like New York pizza is like you can find similar pizza elsewhere.
Right.
It's just there's a heavy concentration of a particular style of pizza with a lot of people doing it really well in New York City because that's a thing that they do there. It can be mimicked. You don't need their special water. Like it can be done. It has been done. So whatever. I would try it because I love pizza, but not because I feel like I would have to try it.
Yeah.
What I do feel like I have to try someday in New York City is a bagel, because they claim to have a corner on that market that I don't know enough about. I do like bagels, but I'm wondering, like, Can they be that different?
Can they
Like,
be
is
that
it-
much better? And wasn't the cronut a thing like 10 years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
So is that still a thing? Yeah, the pizza, I don't know. So the first thing my colleague who lives in Redwood City, California now, the first thing he did when he got here was go have a piece of Sal's. I guess Sal's Pizza is like the New York style pizza. And so he
Okay.
walked like umpteen blocks to go get a slice from Sal's. But yeah, New York style is for sure my favorite. So it's good to know that I can get it in more places than just New York City, and it still tastes pretty close to authentic. But I have not done that yet.
Okay.
I'll keep you posted because
Yeah.
I know we talk a lot about pizza on this show.
I expect next week we talk entirely about pizza.
I am kind of excited, and this will my last talking point. So it's been nice. It's been nice actually to travel and just see a different corner of the world and different faces in different places and try different foods. And I have a dream that one day I'll have a work assignment in LA so I can visit the Comedy Store and go watch some of my favorite stand-up comics.
Yeah.
But when I realized I was coming out here to New York, I was like, there's two iconic comedy clubs here in New York, and the Comedy Cellar is one of them. So I'm thinking about trying to find a way to maybe go catch a lineup of some pretty legit comics tomorrow night. I don't want to talk too much about it because then if it doesn't happen, I'm going to look a fool. But I heard that like on weeknights, cast members from SNL go to the Comedy Cellar to just try to practice their sketches.
Yeah.
And so it'd be cool to see like some SNL cast members working on their stuff on like a random weeknight. And then like David Tell might pop in, or like Papa might pop in. He's on the lineup this week at the Cellar. So just cool when you come to a major city and you know, because in the Midwest, we've talked about this before, you might get those guys come through once a year, once every 2 years if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But on any given night in LA or New York City, or like places like Austin now, since Joe Rogan and like a whole bunch of people from LA have moved out there, comics have moved out there, you can see some of your top 5-10 comedians in one night.
Right.
At the main room at one of these places. So I might check that out. Yeah. So that'll be cool. But and speaking of stand-up, I have to mention you talked college football earlier and we talked internet earlier. So the Venn diagram that is stand-up, college football, and internet. Sebastian Maniscalco was hanging out with the Ohio State football coach Ryan Day this past week. I don't know if Sebastian's tour was going through Columbus. I honestly don't even know. Which loyal listeners of the show will be shocked to hear that I didn't know where he was at any given moment in time. But yeah, he shared a picture online of him hanging out with Ryan Day, and something funny about two Ohio State players on the sidelines with very Italian last names, and something about that they were going to make meatball sauce or something for everybody after the game. But yeah, I just thought that was cool. Dillon shared it from some of our social media pages and was like, it's like all of our favorite things came together for one glorious moment. It's fun.
That's good. I'm sure he was probably showing up just to like give they'll hire guys just to come in to talk to the team.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, and so.
But usually that parallels with them being there for on tour or something.
It certainly could. Or if your pockets are as deep as Ohio State's and you're just looking for ways to spend money, like whatever.
So I'll let you know if I make it to the Cellar and get a New York slice. It's an internal meeting, so there's a little less pressure than when you're in front of a customer this week. So that's kind of nice. But I will be back on by the time this episode drops, I'll be back on Wednesday evening. And then I'm really looking forward to taking my wife to a nice dinner for our anniversary. On the 16th. So looking forward to going to the Barn in Gahanna. Have you been?
I've not.
I've heard nothing but good things from one of our mutual friends, Tim. So excited to check out the Barn, which used to be a Hoggies.
Yes, I was. I went there when it was Hoggies.
Yeah,
I loved Hoggies. And now I kind of hate the Barn because it's not Hoggies.
Man, their mac and cheese was phenomenal. And Sherry has duplicated it pretty close to how good Hoggies used to make it.
Oh, man. I'm going to
Anyway.
come over and get kind of demandy about mac and cheese.
It's that time of year where we're all celebrating anniversaries. So happy anniversaries to all you lovebirds out there. Kendall, it's been good catching up with you, man. Thanks for making
Likewise.
the time. It's a little later than we normally like to record, but it's been good catching up with you for a bit. And I look forward to being back in the studio soon.
Yeah. And then everybody join us next week. We're going to have a special episode discussing bagels and pizza.
No doubt.
And famous comics. Until next time, this has been episode number 119. We miss you, Dillon. We love you. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.